Elliotte Friedman coming in with the bullshit right at the start of right even before we hit record. I don't like this. You know what? You said you got to go out and shovel some snow, and then I had a thought, and then you insulted me.
You didn't have the thought. Craig had the thought.
Thank you.
Craig,
thank you, Elliotte.
Why don't you repeat what you said for everybody, Elliotte? Why don't you go ahead and
well, we were talking about the snow, and I have to shovel, and Craig said he had to shovel, and he says he loves this weather because it's not too cold and beautiful big flake and beautiful big flakes, I think he said. And I said, well, I can see why you like that because you work with a beautiful big flake. I think that's a compliment, personally.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Actually, no, that's not. No. But I love it.
Beautiful big
It's a great way to start my morning.
You got called beautiful, and you got called big. I'd take 2 out of 3. That's not bad.
Yeah, well, I'd rather be ugly, small, and not a flake than, the flake is the part that absolutely brings it all down. It's funny. Riv says this is heaven weather, right? Oh, this is heaven. I love this. Says the guy from Northern Ontario who goes and puts in a fire pit in his backyard this year, but has a gas line run to it. There's nothing less Northern Canadian than putting a gas line into your fire pit, Riv. Build a woodshed and do it properly for crying out loud.
Listen, where I live, number one, you're not allowed to have a woodshed or a shed of any nature.
Craig lives in the Beverly Hills of Buffalo, Elliotte. You gotta know.
You can't have a shed where you live. Why not?
That is that's the rules. No sheds in the backyard, nothing. So anyway, moving on. When I put in a fire pit this year, Andrew, I was thinking about my neighbors and respecting them as much as I think the fire pits with the wood and the kindling and everything else and the crackling of the fire, there is nothing better on earth than being up at the cottage and doing that. But here it's just a little bit different feel, a little bit different vibe. And you know what? It still does the trick.
So Elliotte, I listened to some of your 32 thoughts from Saturday night. By the way, love the suit combo that you had going there.
Thanks.
Love the suit. What kind of comments did you hear about that one?
Oh, a lot. I got piled on a lot. It was good though. Like that's one of the reasons I do it. I want, we're all, I want people to have a good time with it. I want people to be able to have fun. That's what it's all about.
So how close is the Montreal Canadiens GM search and is Danny Briere a very likely candidate?
He's a very legitimate contender. Yes. I think it sounds like it's down to 3 people. It sounds like it's down to him, to Matthew Darche, and to Kent Hughes, the player agent, if Kent Hughes wants to be considered. And I think he's making that decision right now. There was some thought it could be today. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's probably going to be middle of the week. But the Canadiens want to conclude this. And they want an answer if Kent Hughes is in the race or not.
And Kent Hughes, for people that don't know the name, because Kent Hughes didn't know the correlation between him and the GM Gordon. What's the relationship?
Well, Jeff Gordon's a Boston area guy, even though was the GM of the Rangers most recently. He's from Boston area, and Kent Hughes is from Quebec. But he moved down. He played NCAA hockey at Middlebury College in Vermont, and he moved down to the Boston area. Actually, Ken had a brother, Ryan, who was drafted 22nd overall by Quebec in 1990. And the joke is that, if they could mix those two personalities together, they would have gotten a hell of a player. Kent Hughes and Gordon, they know each other from the Boston area, and they've just become friendly over the years. They've done some deals together, and Gordon really knows him and trusts him and wanted to bring him in. I think before the GM process even started, when Gordon was signing with the Canadiens, Hughes was someone he had targeted and said, "Do you want to come work in the organization with me?" And at the time, Hughes said no. They went through the search, but they were always going to go back to him and say, "Do you want to be part of this?" So I think they've gone back to him right now, and he just has to make up his mind.
Is that the leading candidate if he wants to take that position?
I think so, yes. Yeah. I do think so, yes.
Okay, so does it sound like I don't know who else is out there. I mean, maybe you could share some names of other candidates that have had experience GMing in the league before, but with a franchise like Montreal, I kind of feel like, is this the direction that you want to go? I love Danny Briere. I mean, maybe he turns out to be a great GM. Matthew Darche, I don't know what he's been doing. And
he's
Kent
in Tampa.
Hughes. Okay. Yeah, he's in Tampa. Right. Okay. So thank you for reminding me of that. But I guess
no problem.
So, I mean, is this this? It sounds like it's an unconventional approach to hiring a general manager. I mean, like with a franchise like Montreal, I would have thought that their fan base, and Craig, you played there, would have wanted somebody with a big name and status that has experience GMing in the league. Am I wrong with that, or?
I think you have to look at this a little bit differently. I think instead of getting caught up in the titles, that's one thing that happens to people. Sometimes I think people get too caught up in titles. My question is, where's the seat of power? And the seat of power is with Jeff Gordon. He may not be the GM, but he's running the hockey operations and he is making the decisions. And so what he's going to do is he's going to have somebody with him who is, going to be sort of the face. Gordon's not French. It's a big deal there, obviously. And they need somebody in the position who can communicate in the province's primary language to much of their fan base and sort of grow into the job. I think Briere would be perfect if it ends up being him. I think he'd be a great choice. You guys know Daniel. And the other thing, too, is, if you look at Daniel's path in hockey, nothing has ever been gifted to him as a player and now as an executive. Yeah. He's running an ECHL team. He's learned the business. That ECHL team is owned by Comcast in Maine. They're owned by Comcast, which is the owner of the Philadelphia Flyers. So he understands what it's like to work in a corporate environment and do all the things that you have to do to be successful in a corporate environment. Last weekend, their American Hockey League team, Lehigh Valley, they had a couple COVID cases among the assistant coaches. So Daniel went on the bench and he coached on Friday and Saturday night as an assistant for the Phantoms. I think he's learning this the right way. And, to be honest, guys, if I'm the Philadelphia Flyers, I'm wondering, do I want to lose this guy? Do I see him as somebody who's got a bright future in our organization and we want to keep him? And I do think those discussions are being held as well.
He's all class, right? Like he's such a classy guy, and he's so well respected for probably the reasons that you just mentioned, that nothing was ever handed to him and gifted to him throughout his career, being a late first-round pick to being traded, out of Phoenix to Buffalo.
Waivers.
Yeah, was he waived?
Waivers. Yeah,
waivers. Yeah. So I mean, he's definitely, he's earned his stripes. Now, I guess if he doesn't end up in Montreal, could he be snatched up by somebody else rather quickly? Like, let's say Buffalo Sabres.
Look, I think that his star is on the rise, right? I think if he wants to, he will be a GM some way, the way his path is going. And, possible. Like I said, if he doesn't end up being the GM in Montreal, I wonder what Philly's going to do here. Are they going to say, like, I've heard that they really like him. I've heard they're really impressed by the job he's done, his willingness to learn, his willingness, to learn in the East Coast League, basically, as opposed to at the top. And so I think the first question is going to be is what the Flyers say about all this. How do they promote him internally in the organization? And I don't necessarily think to GM yet, but in a position where he gets a promotion and he becomes more important in the day-to-day running of the Flyers. That's kind of what I'm wondering. So I think he'd be perfect for someone like Buffalo. And I think you guys are going in the right direction anyway. I know it doesn't always show up on the ice, and the game against Detroit on the weekend was a real dud. And I know there's an afternoon game today, but I think you guys are kind of going in the right direction. But I don't think, with the willingness that Briere has shown to learn from the ground up, I think he'd be an asset to any organization.
Yeah, I just look at Danny Briere and how he played his career. He thought the game and, at a completely different level than most guys in the league. He's, highly offensive. He just thought the game. I just look at these young guys that are not quite here yet. They're not here. They're going to be here very soon. You know, the JJ Peterkas, the Peyton Krebs, the Jack Quinn, Owen Powers, like these players are very, very skilled hockey players. And I think that Danny Briere can relate to these young players too. I'm just wondering, I just find in the National Hockey League nowadays that, you know, GMs are not making decisions just by themselves. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's unless you have an older statesman of a GM that is old school. A lot of these GMs do it by committee. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of dialogue that goes in behind the scenes before they make any single move. So it's not just one singular GM making decisions. I look at, you know, Kevin Adams has been put in this position to, you know, try and drive the Sabres in the right direction. And it's going to take time. I mean, you can't speed this process up. You're going to have to go through a little bit of heartache to allow those younger players to develop. But I just wonder if you know, Kevin Adams could move to a position of president. You know, you have Karmanos, who has been in this game a very long time, and bringing in a guy like Daniel Briere. And I know the fan base, every single person known to man would be happy with that move.
Well, the Sabres need a president of hockey ops at some point. I mean, like, in my opinion, and if Kevin Adams doesn't move from GM to hockey ops to hire a GM, I mean, that's just where I think Danny Briere would be an ideal fit if he weren't to get this job. But that's my own personal opinion.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, the one thing I completely agree with you with is that I think a true leader is someone who is not afraid to surround themselves with people who are willing to disagree with them. You know, one of the reasons I like working with Bieksa on Hockey Night, and a lot of the other people I work with at Hockey Night, is that if they think I'm full of it, they'll tell me I'm full of it. And I think you need that to have a good organization.
Yeah.
You know, Craig, like, for example, you were part of leadership groups when you were with Koivu in Montreal. Was he afraid of anybody telling him, Saku, like, you're an imbecile with this stance? Or Joe Thornton or in San Jose, like Thornton, he strikes me as the kind of guy who really loves it when people disagree with him. He loves a good argument and defending his position. You know, I think that's the way front offices should work. The weakest front offices I've ever heard are the front offices where someone says it doesn't allow people to disagree with them, or like that. That's not how the best decisions get made.
Yeah. Well, you know, listen, I mean, the head guy is going to make
at the end of the day, it's your call. It's your
exactly.
call. Yeah,
exactly. You're the one who has to go and address the media and talk to everybody. As a player situation, you know, dealing with Saku Koivu and Sheldon Surrey and players like that behind the scenes, we were all very good friends, but we were all not afraid to give our opinions. And we all had different opinions. They were all strong opinions. When I was in San Jose, Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Kyle McLaren, you know, Mike Briere, Jeremy Roenick, we were all in the room together. And believe me, there's a lot of personality in there, and there was a lot of different opinions. And at the end of the day, you know, the top dog made the opinion, and I was okay with that. I was just a support guy. I was an assistant there, and I gave my opinion, and then I stepped back and said, you guys take and do what you want. I'll support you either way. That's the most important thing is to have people that are going to give their own opinion, whether it goes against the grain, and then be able to step back and support whatever decision is made. That's the most important thing.
Argue privately, support publicly.
Exactly. And I think Kevin Adams, the way, and just knowing Kevin for a number of years now, he is a listener. He is going to take in as much information as possible, even if he doesn't like what he's hearing. He is going to listen to it, because at the end of the day, he's the one who's going to make the decision with all this information that's being brought in. So
I liked your fortune. I liked your fortune cookie wisdom there, Elliotte. Argue privately, support publicly. That's good. I like that. I never heard that before.
Really? You've never heard that before?
Well,
That's a genius statement, right?
That's
there,
just
right?
for me. That's the flake coming out, Elliotte. I never heard that before. It sounds good. Sounds good and logical, by the way. Speaking of logical, transition. Yeah, right. You got Connor McDavid out in Edmonton with some. I mean, he took some heat. He's been taking some heat a little bit for his comments. Just about the idea of Evander Kane coming in.
Wow.
And, I'm paraphrasing here and I might nail the quote because I watched it a few times because so many people were upset and disappointed with what he said. He was asked about Evander Kane coming to the team. And he said, look, if fans don't like it, if media doesn't like it, kind of in a way, too bad. I mean, is that how we're supposed to interpret that? Or does he just not want to deal with this stuff?
I think it's both. If you go back and you listen to that whole clip, he should have just stopped after the first sentence, which was basically, we'll talk about this if it happens. But he just kept going. The number one thing that I thought after watching that clip was, I just didn't understand how in this day and age he knows he's going to be asked the question. Why doesn't he have a prepared answer for it? He wasn't prepared really well to answer the question. And
what was the question? What was the
basically
question?
about how you feel about Evander Kane coming to Edmonton?
Why wouldn't you just be like, you know what, I'll answer that question when he comes?
Well, basically that was the first thing that came out of his mouth, Craig, and then he kept rambling. And that was where he got himself into trouble. That's what it just surprised me because McDavid, he has a plan. When he goes on the ice, he has a plan, right? He knows what he's going to do or what he's going to try to do. And he just didn't have one for that media conference. And you have to, you're going to be asked that question. You better be prepared to handle it properly. And that's what I would have said in his shoes. Or I guess instead of that's what I would have said in his shoes, like if that's the way he wants to attack the question, then he should have stopped right there. Look, I think it's a couple of things. It's Evander Kane is anytime you mention his name, it's a 3-ring circus, right? It's a 5-alarm blaze. And, you should see my inboxes whenever I report on him. I get a bunch of people, saying, you're not taking a hard enough stance on this guy. And I got a bunch of people calling me a racist for not defending the guy. So it's something that, whenever you mention it, it polarizes people. People are very polarized about Kane. And that's just the way life is right now. So I think that whenever, if your team is considering adding him, you have to be prepared with a very good answer to the question, because every word you say is going to be under the microscope.
Yep.
And that's where I thought it wasn't handled very well. I mean, the other thing now, guys, is Edmonton's going very poorly. So you've got, on one hand, you got people coming after you about Kane. And on the other hand, you've got people coming after you because your team is terrible. And if you saw McDavid after the game on Saturday night, he had the 1,000-yard stare going that night.
I think what you just said is absolutely right. I think the comments that he was, or would I say venom? I mean, he seemed pissed off. I mean, he seemed really kind of irritated, and I don't think it has anything to do with Kane. I think that was more about everything else going on. And I think it was just all coming out there. Like, if you don't like it, too bad, like, I think that was an opportunity for him to kind of vent, but have it covered up by the question of Kane. I think he's furious with the analysis of his team. I think he's furious with how everybody's writing about him and the rest of his team and with the expectations. I mean, he's got a ton of pressure there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And also he hates losing, like losing sucks. Losing absolutely sucks. It's the worst. And, that's the other thing that people forget here. I mean, you guys played in intense markets, Montreal, Buffalo, really passionate, a lot of pressure. When you lose, it sucks. And, like they were 16-5. They were number one in their division. I think they were number one in the league. and now they're out of a playoff berth, and they just had a horrible loss to Ottawa. Like, how do you think he feels?
Yeah. Now, moving in another direction, there has been a lot of talk about Evander Kane signing. Obviously would do wonders, I think, for Edmonton. He's kind of exactly the type of player that they need. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing on the trade market right now? I'm also hearing Josh Anderson in Montreal possibly could be on the market. Brendan Gallagher, there's going to be names come up. Is there a name that's keeps popping up for you right now?
I think that a lot of this stuff is going to be happening in the next. I think a lot of these teams are having their scouting meetings right now, Craig.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to start to hear names really start to get out there in the next week or so. The thing about Montreal is I think Montreal is going to do a teardown. Like, Sherratt is obvious right now because he's an unrestricted free agent. But I do think there's going to have to be a conversation about Gallagher, a conversation about Anderson, and even a conversation eventually about Price.
What about Toffoli?
And Toffoli, like everybody. To me, Montreal, who are they not going to trade? They're not going to trade Caulfield. They're not going to trade Suzuki. They're not going to trade like one of their young prospects like Caden Gould. I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to trade guys like that. But I think they'll do just what anyone else. Like at some point in time, there's going to be conversations with all these people about how they feel. The tough thing in some of these cases are going to be the contracts. All of those players still have term. Not Toffoli so much, but Anderson does, and Gallagher does, and Price does, and Petrie does. And I think that they're going to have to have conversations with these players about how do they feel, what do they want to do. Do they want to go somewhere else? I mean, the key thing with Price is he's got to play. He has to play. And once he comes back and shows he's healthy, I think they'll start to sit down and figure out what his future is going to be.
Oh, I'll tell you this, Montreal's sitting in last place right now. Sitting in last place right now.
Arizona game today, it's huge.
I will tell you this. My son watches every Montreal game. He puts on his Montreal toque. He's walking around with his he had a Domi jersey that was signed by Domi, and he is a huge Montreal fan. Huge. He was born there, and that's his team, okay? He played against Shane Wright growing up. And I'm going to tell you right now, he wants nothing more in the world than to see Shane Wright put on a Montreal Canadiens jersey. That would be huge for that organization.
What's your son's name?
Nate.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's 17.
Okay. And he's
turning 18, yeah.
And you played against Wright?
Yeah.
Where?
What's brewing in your head there, Elliotte?
I'm making a note of it.
Just in spring tournaments when they were younger, when he played, he's originally from Burlington. Shane Wright's originally from Burlington, played in Burlington for years, but then moved to the GTHL to play. And then he played up a level, but he had, my brother, I had told you about in the springtime, had Shane Wright on the year older, the 2003 team.
Yeah.
And my brother literally was like dumbfounded with how good this young man was when he was 13 years old. So anyway, we know we've grown up in the Shane Wright era, and he's a heck of a hockey player. He's a heck of a person, and it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. And I just look at the Montreal Canadiens sitting at the bottom of the league right now. I'll tell you, Montreal would certainly be picking up a future captain in that young man.
Well, can you imagine? Well, it's going to make everybody listening to this Buffalo-based podcast just absolutely nauseated. But Montreal, with the number one pick in Montreal at the draft this year, picking Shane Wright first overall, and Nate Rivet leading the cheers in the crowd.
Absolutely, yeah. No question.
That's great for us, Elliotte. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. It's like we get enough hate from time to time. You know what I mean? We won't keep you too much longer here. All-Star game. I mean, it's coming up, and I don't like how every team has to have a representative there. I can't stand this. Rasmus Dahlin, as skilled as he is, does not deserve to go to the All-Star game. He's not an All-Star. And yet here he is going to the All-Star game. Why are we doing this? Why is it not best on best? I mean, why are we not fine? I don't care if there are 5 players from one team. Why is it going this route?
This is such a debate. Every year I hear this. And to be honest, I don't have a huge rooting interest in it. I don't get wound up about All-Star games. I just don't. There's enough to get wound up in the world that I don't get wound up about All-Star games. But there are people who feel your way, but there's also people who feel, and one of them is the commissioner. He has always believed, give every market a reason to watch your All-Star game. And you know what? In Buffalo, you guys are such great fans of hockey. You might watch it anyway, but he wants a Sabre there.
You know what? I'll watch Dahlin in the skills competition for sure. I mean, let me say this. I'm not a fan of the All-Star game. I can't stand the 3-on-3. I cannot stand the 3-on-3 format. I hate it. Now, I understand why they're doing it at the end of games. I wish they'd get rid of the shootout and extend 3-on-3 hockey if that's what we have to do. Quite frankly, I'd like to go back to ties, but I'm old school. But I hate the 3-on-3. I hate the 3-on-3. If I want to watch the 3-on-3, I'll go over to Craig's and watch the kids playing in the back pond there.
The 3-on-3 years ago was incredible. I was hoping that it would end tied, because then you got to see the best players in the world literally flying and
coaches have ruined it.
They've ruined the damn thing.
Yeah.
It is the worst. It is a snail's pace. It is awful to watch. It is absolutely terrible to watch. And how do you do it? How do you screw that up so bad where a couple years ago you had Austin Matthews and Mitchie Marner and you had Riley, and then you have all these insanely high-skilled offensive players flying around on the ice. It is I shake my head at what's going on and how these coaches are able to slow a 3-on-3 game down. It's unbelievable.
It's boring as hell.
The coaches have ruined it. I agree with you. I think the way to do it is to take the 3-on-3 to 10 minutes. And, I would say take the 3-on-3 to 10 minutes. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I would love to see that occur.
Last thing I'll ask you today, Elliotte. And
I like your fireplace, by the way, Andrew.
Yeah, it was roaring, but I'm keeping an eye on the log because one of the logs kind of rolled off to the side.
Oh, so it's not a gas fake one. It's like a real one.
No, it's a real fireplace. I just had a whole cord of wet wood delivered. About they delivered, the thing was soaked. I'm like, what is this? Take it back. He dumped it. I'm like, put it back in your truck and bring me a dry batch. But Sabres, we got to talk some Sabres. I had a message sent to me the other day, and someone saying that, major changes. I mean, major, like there are, major changes to me isn't player personnel, major changes coming to the Sabres organization. And I'm just wondering, and I've been racking my brain on it because that's all he gave me. And I'm just wondering if maybe it circles back to your 25th thought a couple weeks ago on 32 Thoughts about private equity firms buying stake in teams for a minimum of 20 million or a maximum of 30%. Now, I wonder if that's something because we do know that the Pagulas have been trying to sell a portion of the team. So I was wondering if you'd heard anything of the sort, or could it be something along the lines of Kevin Adams moving to president of hockey ops and hiring a general manager, maybe a Daniel Briere, if he doesn't get the job in Montreal. I'm bringing Briere's name into it only because of the Buffalo connection, and that's something I would love to see. But I'm just wondering if maybe you've heard something of the sort.
I told you what I heard about any potential sale, and that is that that nothing was going to happen until after the Bills stadium was sorted out. That, they understood that, here you are trying to get a Bills stadium, and any thought that the Sabres were not safe under their leadership could be a real problem for building that. So until I'm told otherwise, I stick with that opinion. As for the Kevin Adams situation, they have maintained they're not hiring a president of hockey ops, at least the last I checked. And again, to this point, I haven't heard anything different. To be honest, look, like, I understand that the Sabres fans are frustrated with their team, but I do think, and they didn't like the way Eichel was handled, which I completely understand also. But I do think you guys are going in the right direction. I think that you've made some really good hires in the front office. People like Carmano, Sam Ventura. It's too hard to say 100% that it's going to work, but I kind of like where you're going. And I don't, the Pagulas have always said they don't see the need for the president of hockey ops. We'll see. I haven't heard anything different.
How many teams do not have a president of hockey operations?
Well, let me just go through the list. Let's do it right now.
And after 10 years of being in this situation, and the Pagulas not liking the idea of a
Florida, no. Tampa, no. Toronto, yes. Rangers, he's the president and GM. Carolina, no. Washington, no. Pittsburgh, I don't know what you'd want to call that. Boston, yes. Detroit, Yzerman's the seat of power. Columbus, I don't know what you'd call that. Philly, no. Devils, no. Islanders, well, you've got the Uber boss there. Buffalo, no. Ottawa, no. Montreal, yes. And, Montreal was a team that said they weren't going to do it this way, and now they are. Colorado, no. Nashville, no. St. Louis, yes. Vegas, yes. Kings, no. Anaheim, no. You know what? There's a lot of people that don't have it.
Yeah, that's a lot more than what
a lot more than I thought.
Look, like I said, I just think that the Pagulas want to get that stadium done with the Bills, right? I just don't think you're going to fool around with anything that could cost you votes in getting that stadium done.
Well, you win a Super Bowl, and I think you have carte blanche, do you not?
You'd think so. The house that Josh Allen built.
Man, here's a Twitter poll.
I just don't understand.
Josh Allen or Jim Kelly?
What do you mean you don't understand, though?
I don't understand why they both have to be connected. The Sabres are it's hockey. The Bills are something completely different. If you're looking for a stadium, they shouldn't be, connected.
But they are. It's politics.
And we'll end on that. Elliotte, fantastic. Thanks as always, man.
All right, guys. Have yourselves a great week.
Thanks, Elliotte.
You too. That's a wrap on another episode of After the Whistle. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, After the Whistle, and at Craig Rivet 52, at the Instigator 76. And you can find us, as you already know, on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and anywhere else where you can get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to spread the word.